Remove chromatic aberration will help to deal with some of the results of the lens, creating, in a sense, fake colors. Enable profile corrections. You can use, sometimes Lightroom, though, doesn't recognize your lens. So, for example, this says 18 to 200, and I'm using a 20 millimeter lens here. So it's not recognizing the proper lens. I can choose to click off that and not use it. You'll see how the image moves a little bit, and click on it, and you'll see it move again because Lightroom is trying to adjust for the inherent bias of the lens. I can also make changes in distortion vignetting. For now, I'm just going to leave that on because I think it may help a little bit. Right, what I also like to do is go into sharpening. Usually 70s, 80s range is good enough. I have a pretty sharp image. Kick up the radius a little bit. I think around 1.5 I did before and I liked. And I'll leave the rest there. I don't have to worry about noise reduction because I'm using a low ISO on this picture. And I have a pretty good exposure, so I'm not going to bother with the noise reduction there. So what's down here, I really don't have to worry about at this point. Alright, I'm going to kind of head upstairs as I think of it, and I have some different options as we scroll through about what to do. Well, if you saw the other photo, one thing you know that I did was to crop it in, try to crop out the excess. I'm going to come down there, and I can come up from the bottom just to remove some of those shadows while giving a little green in there. There we go. Changes the nature of the photo. And I could crop a little differently, but I want to leave some parts in there just to demonstrate what I want to do. All right, overall color-wise, I can change in the temperature. So whether you use auto white balance or use a color setting, it gives you a temperature. I can move the slider to create a bias in the color. It was pretty good where it was at the 0 point. I can also change it with the tint, more red or more green. I'm thinking it looks a little better with a little green in there. Seems to have a little extra red bias to me, so I'm going to go there. Not quite happy with the shadows, so I can move all the shadows up, but then what happens is I'm getting an effect on the flag that I don't like, so I'm going to bring that back. I'm going to move it over there. A couple of other options I could do. I could try doing the shadows down here and make some changes. When I moved it down here, I didn't notice as much a profound effect on the blue of the flag as I do now in color. So I'm going to drop that down, leave it back to 0, and try something else. One thing I want to show you before I do my adjustment brush is clarity. So clarity creates contrast, especially in the middle tones, and it can provide some detail that you're missing. Now it gives a little weird patterning the more I go in the clarity. So we'll bring that down to 0. And the difference between vibrance and saturation. Vibrance is like saturation in the sense it could give you a candy color or remove it. Saturation goes up, saturation goes down. Vibrance can go up. Here's the image at that 0 point of vibrance and saturation. So what is that big difference between the two? Vibrance is for people, so that when you do saturation, it won't affect the skin tones. This photo makes sense to do saturation because no one's in the photo. So if I wanted to change the saturation, that's not a problem. Now, it wouldn't hurt doing vibrance, but really the big difference is thinking of saturation is without people, vibrance with people. Kind of a simplified explanation, but I think it works fine there. What helps in a photo like this is the adjustment brush. Going into the adjustment brush, I had the shadows kicked up, and just going in, trying to bring in a little more detail there, trying not to make it so harsh with those shadows. And I can just click and drag up the shadows slider, and it doesn't look as pitch black in there. And I'll just go up a little bit with the exposure. I only go a little bit with the exposure on this because when I did the adjustment brush, there was some overlap on the flag. And if I go too far, you'll start noticing the flag gets a little bright, and then the background area gets pretty fake. So I'm just going to go up a little bit just to help bring in a little more detail. And then I click done. Now, if there's something I wanted to do, something I forgot in there, I can always go back in. I can always go back into adjustment brush. Say I want to bring shadows down to 0 and I want to lower some highlights. I can click on the highlight slider, lower it, and just click and drag, and I've made a change there and done. So as you sit back and look and there's changes you want to make, you can always go back into the adjustment brush. And that's why I didn't use these curves points, because I could use the adjustment brush.